Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the socialist campaign group Momentum are adding an interesting dynamic in the push to get Labour to support proportional representation as a mainstream policy in a move that is working in conjunction with an increasing number of people within the party. So, will proportional representation finally be on the menu for the next general election? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, proportional representation and Labour is a very vexed issue, traditionally. It shouldn't be. It should be a complete no-brainer. The situation always seems to be the same. Certainly it has been in my lifetime. When the Conservatives are in power, they stay in power for a good long time. Actually, a bad long time. We do not have a generally right-wing population, but we get right-wing governments almost all the time. Why? Because they lie about their policies. Tony Blair promised to implement proportional representation when he came to power. He did not. Never mind anything else, this was his costliest mistake. But why didn't he? Why hasn't the party really pushed it when it wouldn't just make our society fairer and more democratic, but be personally beneficial to the Labour Party as well? The reason is personal power. Recently, 200 constituency Labour parties held formal ballots in support of the national leadership adopting a policy of proportional representation. Well, that's good. It's 200, and that doesn't mean to say there aren't more than 200 that would do as well. That's 200 saying we want this party to adopt proportional representation. That sounds interesting. Now, it was telling that many of these CLPs were not ones with a Labour MP. See, proportional representation is most appealing to those who would gain more power with it, of course. But there are Labour MPs in safe seats in parts of the country who realise that it would be less safe with PR. See, under PR, you would get more Labour MPs in parts of the country where they're traditionally frozen out, you know, strong Conservative heartlands, but it would come at the cost of safe Labour areas elsewhere as well. So parts of the country that are just painted red, you'd get the odd Conservative MP in there. And it's petty and selfish, but there are influential members of the party who will put their personal position ahead of the needs of the party, ahead of the needs of the country. They would rather be a safe MP in opposition for a generation at a time than to have to fight for their seat with a Labour government, albeit probably in coalition, being in power most of the time. So if Blair promised to implement PR and didn't, and Starmer hasn't actually promised to yet, have we got any right to really hope that we might finally get this important element of electoral reform now? Well, yes. See, there are a few things that are a little bit different now. The first thing is we don't just have a Conservative government who will have been in power for nearly 15 years come the next general election, and looking at 20 years at least if we don't get our act together. What we have now is an extreme one that is literally tearing the country apart. The damage they are doing is so overwhelming that it is becoming more and more difficult to argue for maintaining the system that put them in that position of power. See, a lot of people think, oh, Conservatives are in power now. Yeah, but one day we'll get in power and then we'll do all these wonderful things. And you try and tell them, yeah, but it takes a long time to build something and no time to wreck it. Conservatives come into power, they'll wreck all that work in overnight almost, and you're back to square one by the time you come back to power. But on this occasion, people can see the destruction in real time. It's devastating. Now, the second thing is Starmer has made electoral reform a key mission of his leadership. It's absolutely front and centre of what he wants to do. Now, he hasn't said exactly what that means in regards to reforming Westminster elections. But he's not against PR. When he has spoken about it, which he hasn't spoken at length, it has tended to be positive rather than against it. Now, for him, I'm sure it will come down to this, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Will such a policy unite or divide the party? Where is the greater balance there? And will such a policy unite or divide the key swing voters needed? Now, he's made a point of avoiding getting involved in internal party divisions, even though it means he gets it in the neck from both groups of wreckers. but he's also not going to be willing to pursue a policy that divides key target voters either. But if the issue gains overwhelming support in the party, then it will make sense to open up the debate in the public. If it gains approval there, and bear in mind much of the assembled press will argue against it, but if the case is made, it would seem certain that it will be made a manifesto promise. And if the party are very much on board, you know, in other words, if it's something that Labour really want, as opposed to a concession. With Tony Blair, it was a concession, you know, to form an alliance with the Liberal Democrats effectively. But if it's something that Labour wants, then there will be a real momentum to make it happen. Now, pardon the pun there, but this is where momentum comes in. Now, here's the thing. I would never be a member of Momentum. Policy-wise, totally on board with them, but they are bullies. You know, the reason I refer to them as Labour's version of the ERG is not because it's a party within a party. It is a major movement within the party. It is the fact that they are bullies, you know, and that makes it difficult to ever support them. I prefer arguing my case on a platform of mutual respect. And do you know what? If I don't make my argument strong enough and someone goes away saying, no, we're not going to do that, okay, I had my shot. I don't want to ever dominate people to coming towards a particular point of view. However, that aside, they have polled their not insignificant membership on policies they would like adopted, and proportional representation came in second. First was the £15 an hour minimum wage. Now, I'm always wary of those sorts of specific policies. It's easy for people to support a made-up figure when they don't have to consider the trade-offs. The people voting for that, I'd say to them, so how do you come up with that £15 figure then? My personal view on it is simply this. It should be decided independently, it should be calculated. Obviously, it needs to be at least equal to the realistic living wage. If you've got people working full-time that still need benefits and access to food banks, that wage ain't good enough. But anyway, that aside, it's always encouraging where groups within the party decide that not only is proportional representation something to support, but it's a top issue. Because the fact that it's an issue to support is irrelevant. I mean, you could reel off 100 policy proposals that people in any party might agree with, but you can't have all of them. You can't have all of them adopted, so you have to choose your top ones. Proportional representation for me is the top issue. It trumps literally everything else. The reason I say that is because without it, you will not only continue to have Conservative governments in power most of the time, so you won't get any of your other policies, but we now know that we can get extreme, unashamedly fascist ones in power. But with PR, I'm not saying everything will be sunshine and happiness, and I'm not going to be one of those people who say the Conservatives will be frozen out of power forever, but the extreme wing of the party will be. And we will get a society much more in tune with what people want, because how can you not? The problem in the past is that people in Labour didn't mind the Conservatives in government for years at a time, as long as their personal power, their seat, was safe. And when Labour did win power, they'd win all the power for a few years. With PR, the Prime Minister would almost always be the Labour leader. Most of the time be that. But they'd be governing with other parties as well. But the views are changing. Labour safe seats were lost by the dozen in 2019. Hartlepool, a once safe Labour seat that was effectively lost in 2019, but the party retained it because the Brexit party split the vote massively with the Conservatives. I mean, that's looking like it's going to go to the Conservatives next month in a by-election. It might not, it's not looking good. All of a sudden, Labour only have pocket strongholds now. Now, in such an environment, proportional representation is much less of a risk for them and much more of a gain. Another thing giving me hope is that we have seen lots of groups and people in Labour talking up PR. One of the more influential, John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn's right-hand man, has been very much beating the drum for it. It's a shame he didn't do so when they were in charge of the party, but there it is. But in the last few months, you've seen an increasing number of people really getting that conversation in the party and really talking up proportional representation. Now, I'll tell you what I haven't seen. I haven't seen a reactionary counter protest against it, a counter movement against PR. Now, this will be because either that opposition within the party is genuinely in retreat, that they don't believe Starmer will back it, so they don't have to argue, or because I just haven't seen it. Now, finally, though, I think there is another reason to be hopeful. It does not seem realistic that Labour could sweep to power in 2024, with the usual political game being played, that is. Even if it's played well, and we do not know if it will be played well. It doesn't seem at all realistic. The Conservatives already have control over the media. And I don't just mean the media that support the Conservatives anyway. Even other forms of the media, like the BBC, are well under their thumb. And they are planning to mess with the constituency boundaries to give them even more power with a smaller share of the popular vote. Labour needs something new, a real edge that was always available but has rarely been brought into play. It needs a progressive alliance. That is a pact with, at the very least, the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party, that each of them will stand down candidates in any constituency that is between the Conservatives and one of them. So you'll have a lot of constituencies around the country. It'll be between Labour and the Conservatives. The Liberal Democrats and the Green Party would agree to step down. In return, there'll be some places where Labour have no chance of winning. They would have to agree to stand their candidates down. The one with the most chance stands their candidate with the backing of the others. This is always on offer, but Labour tend to turn it down. Now, this policy will not be adopted now, if it ever is. People are calling for it to be adopted now. It must be adopted now. It won't be adopted now. It can't be. It would be attacked within Labour as Starmer raising the white flag, admitting that he can't win the next general election on his own. That would play out very badly internally in the party, but also at the wider public. The Conservatives would have a field day. It's not possible to adopt it now. He's already under enough pressure. He doesn't need to score own goals. But if we get to 6 months out from the election and the polls are not showing overwhelming chances of stunning victory, which they won't, then the party's hand may be forced. We could see the next general election with a Labour Party that finally decides that it must win and that it will take whatever route it reasonably can to get that win. And that route will be a progressive alliance and a strongly supported platform of major electoral reform with proportional representation leading the way. And with more people advocating within the Labour Party for this, and I think that figure's only going to get higher the more damage the Conservatives cause. The Conservatives are going to cause a lot more damage in the next few years. The calls should hopefully grow louder and louder. I think there is genuinely a hope that by the end of this decade, despite the damage caused by the Tories, that we could really move forward as a country. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.